Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy interview guidance program. So in today's lecture we are going to discuss about the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. See, this 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts are very important for your mains examination, because every year you can expect at least one question in your mains examination, particularly in the general studies paper 2. So therefore you have to be very careful, and it is also very obvious that in interview also you may get questions on the local self-governance institutions that were established through the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. So therefore you have to be very thorough when it comes to the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. So you have to understand the nuances of this particular act and what are the powers, functions and responsibilities of the self-governance institutions, and especially they have been facing a lot of challenges and lot of problems when it comes to the devolution of powers to these local self-governance institutions. So this is the key of the local self-governance institutions. So when the powers were not adequately devolved to these local self-governance institutions, then they would not function up to the mark. Okay, so they will not be able to fulfill the objective that has been envisioned by the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. Now what is the objective of these local self-governance institutions? That is, democratic decentralization is the first and foremost objective of these institutions. Okay, so democratic decentralization. So apart from democratic decentralization, the other most important objective of these institutions is to ensure participatory governance. Participatory governance means citizens actively taking part in the governance at the grassroots level. So these are the four most objectives of the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. So when powers are not adequately devolved to these institutions, and then they will not be able to fulfill the objectives which are mentioned here. Right. So in this context, we will be discussing about all those dimensions with respect to the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. Okay, so the content that we are providing here is very important. If possible, make note of the content as well. Okay, so why the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts are in news? Because we all know that the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts were passed in the year 1992. So we can say that almost 3 decades have been passed since these two amendments, these two constitutional amendments have been passed. So therefore it is envisaged that the local bodies in India would function as institutions of local self-governance, and this has been mentioned under Article 40 of the Indian Constitution. So Article 40 of the Indian Constitution has a Gandhian principle. Okay, so Gandhian principle. So Gandhian principle means that the Gandhi has emphasized on the local self-governance and directive principles of state policy. Article 40 talks about the local self-governance institutions at the village level. Right. So in this context, we need to understand what is a Panchayati Raj institution. So that were established under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Acts. So what are these Panchayati Raj institutions? So Panchayati Raj institutions primarily are local self-governance institutions at the grassroots level, right? So at the grassroots level, there's an arrangement where we have the sarpanch and ward members, right, and a village secretary. So all those representatives, they are directly elected by the people. Okay, so people directly elect their representatives at the grassroots level, and therefore the governance at the village level is overseen by the elected representatives on behalf of the people. So however, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act has provided for the Gram Sabha. Okay, so it has provided for the an institution called Gram Sabha. So in the Gram Sabha, every member of the village who is listed in the electoral roll, takes part as a member of Gram Sabha. So in that particular Gram Sabha, the villagers would raise the challenges, the issues they have been facing, and new government schemes that were intended for the benefit of different categories. So everything will be discussed in the Gram Sabha in a detailed way. So all the villagers will take part in the Gram Sabha along with their representatives and the government representative as well. So briefly, this is what is the local self-governance institutions or Panchayati Raj institutions. Right. So in this context, the local self-government is management of the local affairs, such as local bodies, and these local bodies have the elected representatives. Right. So these local bodies have the elected representatives, as I have already told you, because one sarpanch, and then ward members. So they are directly elected by the people. Okay, ward members and sarpanch directly elected by the people, and they are the representatives of the people who are elected by the people. So the Panchayati Raj institutions were constitutionalized. That essentially means that this Panchayati Raj institutions have been provided the constitutional status under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, so why the constitutional status has been provided for the Panchayati Raj institutions? It is because of building or strengthening democracy at the grassroots level. Okay, so democratic decentralization at the grassroots level, and also entrusting them, the Panchayati Raj institutions, with the task of rural development. Now, if you look at the rural areas in India have been facing multiple challenges. Okay, so they have been facing number of challenges, whether it is poverty, gender equality, discrimination, agriculture backwardness, infrastructure backwardness, such as lack of effective connectivity, lack of adequate provision for education and healthcare. So therefore, Panchayati Raj institutions essentially aimed to develop these facilities in the rural areas. Okay, so that ultimately comes under the objective of holistic rural development. Okay, so this constitutes holistic rural development. Right. So this is briefly the Panchayati Raj institutions. So earlier I have already told you that these Panchayati Raj institutions were constituted as part of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment in 1993. Okay, now what are the major provisions which are mentioned in the 73rd Constitutional Amendment that we are going to discuss in a brief manner? So earlier I have told you that Article 40 of the Indian Constitution, particularly the DPSPs, has mentioned a Gandhian principle. So what is this Gandhian principle? So this principle provided for the establishment of Panchayati Raj institutions at the village level, so that they can function as institutions of self-governance. And this has been provided by the Article 40 of the Indian Constitution, that is to say, Directive Principles of State Policy. Now please remember, this Directive Principles of State Policy are non-justiciable in nature. Okay, so however, the DPSPs, the Constitution directly says that they are fundamental in the governance of the country. However, the government will not be compelled to implement the directive principles of state policy. Rather, these directive principles of state policy are fundamental in the governance of the country. This is what the Constitution has said. And in line with the constitutional spirit, and in order to give effect to the Gandhian principle of Article 40, the government has brought 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act in the year 1993. Right? So clear. And what does this Article 40 says? The Article 40 of the Directive Principles of State Policy clearly says that the state shall take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of self-government. Okay, so this essentially means that the government should create an institutional architecture such as the Panchayati Raj institutions, and the government should endow them with such powers and authority. Okay, so the government must endow them with such powers and authority to enable them to function as institutions of self-government. So however, the unfortunate aspect of this providing powers and authority is that the state governments are reluctant to devolve more powers and more authority to the Panchayati Raj institutions, and that is where they are not able to perform in a better manner, right? So after that, we need to talk about the very same Panchayati Raj institutions which are also mentioned in part 9 of the Indian Constitution apart from Article 40. So the part 9 of the Indian Constitution entitled Panchayats, the Panchayats, and consists of the provisions from Article 243 to 243O. So whenever we talk about the Panchayati Raj institutions, as per the Indian Constitution, Article 243 to Article 243O talks about the Panchayati Raj institutions. So all these provisions talks about the Panchayati Raj institutions. For example, if I can say Article 243 K talks about the election commission, and Article 243 I talks about the finance commission. Okay, so in a similar fashion from Article 243, Article 243O, all these article talks about the Panchayati Raj institutions. Clear? So we also know that Indian Constitution have 12 schedules. Okay, so in all 12 schedules, 11th schedule specifically talks about the Panchayati Raj institution. So the 11th schedule says the panchayats will have 29 functional items with them. Okay, so these are the items such as the drinking water facilities, electricity, rural roads, healthcare, education. So these are the functional items, and these functional items would be overseen by the Panchayati Raj institution. So therefore the 11th schedule has mentioned 29 functional items at the panchayat level. Clear? Okay, so apart from that, we should also understand the devolution of finances to these Panchayati Raj institutions as mentioned under the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1993. So what sort of financial powers were devolved for these Panchayati Raj institutions? So however, when it comes to the devolution of these financial powers, most of the financial powers are kept with the state legislature. However, when the state legislative assembly feels it necessary to provide more powers to Panchayati Raj institutions, then it can devolve more such financial powers. Okay, so now the state legislative assembly can authorize a panchayat to levy, collect, appropriate taxes, duties, tolls, and fees. Okay, so please understand, all these powers, these financial powers, were not directly endowed by the Constitution to Panchayati Raj institutions. Rather, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment has left the matter of devolution of finances to the respective state legislative assemblies. So because of this reason, the Panchayati Raj institutions have not able to enjoy the adequate financial powers. The reason is state legislative assemblies are reluctant to devolve more such financial powers to the Panchayati Raj institutions. Why? Because it may lead to the diversion of their existing financial powers. So because of this reason, the state legislative assemblies were not devolving more financial powers to the Panchayati Raj institutions. So I hope it is clear for you. Okay, so the second point says that the state legislative assembly can assign to a panchayat taxes, duties, tolls, fees levied and collected by the state government. Okay, so this essentially means that every year or once in a 5 years, the state government may provide the finances to the respective Panchayat Raj institutions when state government collect taxes, duties, tolls, fees that can be given to the Panchayat Raj institutions. Okay, but this is not a mandatory provision under the Indian Constitution. And apart from this, the state government can also make grants in aid to those panchayats. So now the problem is that the Panchayati Raj institutions do not have adequate financial powers. So they do not have adequate financial powers. So since they do not have adequate financial powers, so they are depending on external sources of revenue. Okay, external sources of revenue. So when I say external sources of revenue, state government providing grants in aid, state government providing grants in aid to these Panchayati Raj institution. So therefore they have been disproportionately dependent on the grants in aid which provided by the state government, because they do not have their own sources of revenue. Okay, so after that, the provide for the constitution of funds for creating all monies of the panchayats. So these are the some of the provisions. Okay, so but they are not obligatory or mandatory provisions which are mentioned under Article 73rd of the Indian Constitution. So if the state legislative assembly wanted to devolve all these powers to the panchayats, they can devolve, right? Now after that, we should talk about the State Finance Commission also. So earlier, as part of Article 243I, so this Article 243I of the Indian Constitution has provided for the State Finance Commission. Okay, so this says that the governor of a state shall, after every 5 years, constitute a finance commission to review the financial position of the panchayats. Okay, similar to at the central level how the president used to constitute one finance commission after every 5 years, at the state level also the governor constitute finance commission in every 5 years, after every 5 years. So that essentially review the financial position of the Panchayati Raj institutions or panchayats. Okay, so now so apart from this, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act has also provided for the following aspects. One is Gram Sabha. Okay, so with the essence of Gram Sabha is that it provides for direct democracy. Okay, at the village level it provides for the direct democracy, and at the same time it also ensures active participation of the citizens in the democratic process. Okay, active participation of the citizens in the democratic process, and that is how there will be a democratic decentralization at the grassroots level. So that is how we can achieve the democratic decentralization at the grassroots level. Okay, so therefore they will the Gram Sabha will have a very significant role in fostering self-sufficiency and sustainable development at the grassroots level. Now village level is also called as the grassroots level. Now grassroots level is a more formal word, right? So the Gram Sabha can leverage the local resources for sufficient or adequate resources or revenue generation, right? So after that, the inclusive participation. So Gram Sabhas ensure inclusive participation of the people. Okay, so therefore it envisions that the people can directly participate in the planning process, decision making and implementation of revenue generating initiatives. For example, all the people who are part of the Gram Sabha sit together and decide on the revenue generating activities or initiatives, right? So when revenues are adequately generated, the revenue can be used for the betterment and the development of the village. Okay, so therefore these revenue generating activities or initiatives will be collectively decided and discussed by the members of the Gram Sabha. And after that, Gram Sabha will also have an important role with respect to the financial management at the state level. So because Gram Sabhas as a collective bodies have the authority to impose taxes, fees, levies, and also directing the funds towards the local development projects. Okay, so local development projects, public services and social welfare programs. So therefore Gram Sabha has been a mandatory body in every panchayat, Okay, so in every Panchayat Raj institution, Gram Sabha should be conducted, right? So this is what the 73rd constitutional amendment has said with respect to the Panchayati Raj institutions. Now we have to understand how Panchayati Raj can generate the revenues. So generation of the resources for the Panchayati Raj institutions is very, very important, because the overall sustenance and the Panchayati Raj institutions' ability to take up the developmental projects is actually dependent on their ability to generate more and more revenue or resources. Now in this context, what does Article 280 of the Indian Constitution says? So as per the Article 280, the union government can provide certain grants to these Panchayati Raj institutions. Okay, the union government can provide certain grants to these Panchayati Raj institutions under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution. So however, it must be based on the recommendations of the Central Finance Commission. Okay, clear? And similarly, this Article 243I also. So this Article 243I has provided for the State Finance Commission. State Finance Commission, right? So similar to the central government, state government can also devolve funds to the respective Panchayati Raj institutions at the state level based on the recommendations of the State Finance Commission, right? So please remember Article 280 and Article 243I of the Constitution. And apart from these two sources, what are the other major sources of revenue for these Panchayati Raj institutions? So they can they can take loans, and they can also get grants from the state government. Okay, so they get loans and grants from the state government, and apart from that, there will be certain program specific allocations for the different centrally sponsored schemes, and additional central assistance will also be provided. Because now see, the Panchayati Raj institutions are like a heart for the rural area, heart of the rural area. So therefore, in order to undertake any developmental activity in the rural areas, so the Panchayati Raj institutions have been taken as a unit. Okay, so they have been taken as a unit for the rural development. So therefore, whenever the central government has been implementing centrally sponsored schemes, central sector schemes, it has been providing additional central assistance under these schemes to the Panchayati Raj institutions. So therefore, this is also their own source of revenue. And after that, we need to talk about their internal resource generation as well, such as a tax collection and even the non-tax collection, right? So these are the major sources of revenue for the Panchayati Raj institutions. So whenever you asked about a question in a mains, you must say all these points. So now, as I have told you that there is in the internal resource generation, there's a tax and non-tax collection aspect. Tax and non-tax collection dimension. So what does this dimension says? So firstly, tax dimension include property tax, cess on land revenue, surcharge on additional stamp duty, tolls, tax on profession, advertisement. So these forms part of the tax revenue. So when I say non-tax revenue, it primarily includes user charges for water and sanitation and lighting, fees, rent, income from investment. So all these things consider or form part of the non-tax revenue of the Panchayati Raj institutions. However, so in this context, the Panchayati Raj institutions have been facing a lot of issues with respect to the devolution of finances. Please remember, in the earlier part of the lecture, I have told you that the state legislative assemblies are reluctant to devolve more powers, more financial powers to this Panchayati Raj institutions. So in this context, we will understand the issues or the challenges they have been facing. Okay, so first and foremost, these Panchayati Raj institutions were not given adequate attention when it comes to their fiscal empowerment. Fiscal empowerment in the sense that they do not have their own revenue generation sources. They do not have their own revenue generation sources. So instead, they disproportionately dependent on central and state governments for loans and grants in aid. Okay, so therefore we can say that there's a lack of fiscal empowerment with respect to the panchayats, because the state legislative assemblies are reluctant to devolve more powers. So after that, a very popular term that is being extensively used when we write anything about the Panchayati Raj institutions. So these Panchayati Raj institutions were not adequately empowered when it comes to providing 3F. So what does this 3F signifies? So 3F means functions, funds, and functionaries. Okay, so Panchayati Raj institutions were not adequately provided the functions, funds, and functionaries. So they are very important to discharge their constitutionally stipulated functions or constitutionally stipulated responsibilities. So therefore, when they were not given adequate powers and funds, functions, so they will not be able to perform as per the intended objectives. So after that, we need to talk about the disparities, the fiscal disparities in the tax collection and revenue sharing. So among the 3 tiers of the Panchayati Raj institutions. So now please remember, 3-tier Panchayati Raj institution involves that there's a Gram Sabha at the village level, and at the intermediate or block level there's some institution at the intermediate level also, and Mandal Parishad, I think. So it is a Mandal Parishad at the block level, and at the district level Jilla Parishad as well. Okay, so this is a 3-tier structure which is provided by the 73rd constitutional amendment. So there's a fiscal disparity because mostly the funds are either given to the village level Panchayati Raj institutions or at the district level. Generally the block level institutions are largely neglected in terms of the fiscal resources distribution. And after that, if you look at the internal resource generation structure of the Panchayati Raj institutions, it is weak. Okay, so because the tax domain is thin, so they do not have adequate tax generating sources at the village level. So therefore, in fact, if you look at the Panchayati Raj institutions, we can see the reluctance on the part of these institutions to collect taxes, because if you understand carefully, most of the elected representatives belong to the same village, and if they start collecting taxes from the villages, they would face the backlash. From the people. So apart from backlash, because of certain political interests also, they are not willing to collect taxes from the people in those respective villages. So therefore it impacting the internal resource generation of these Panchayati Raj institutions. And apart from that, it has also been facing a few more challenges. Okay, so what are those challenges apart from these? Now, the Gram Sabha has not been working. So the constitution has mandated that the Gram Sabha must meet at least 2 times in a year to discuss different aspects with respect to the village development and empowerment and development of the village. So however, the Gram Sabha has not been met. So after that, the Panchayat Raj institutions were also accused of corruption, large scale corruption. Okay, so large scale corruption and leakage of funds. So therefore, these are the major challenges that these Panchayati Raj institutions have been facing. So in this context, we need to talk about the way forward as well. So what lies ahead? What should be the way forward when we talk about the Panchayati Raj institutions? So as I have already told you that the Panchayati Raj institutions were established at the grassroots level for the purpose of democratic decentralization, and also to ensure participatory governance, where people actively take part in the governance aspects at the grassroots level. So therefore, there's a need to demarcate own source of revenue for the entire 3-tier panchayats. So as I have already told you that the Panchayati Raj have a 3-tier structure at the village level, block level, and at the district level. So all these 3 tiers need to have their own source of revenue first. Okay, so that could minimize the dependency of these Panchayati Raj institutions or different institutions on the grants from the state government, plus central government. So that could ensure the equitable sharing of these revenues. So after that, there's a need to educate the elected representatives and the public. So when people lack awareness, there's a probability that Gram Sabha would not be conducted, they would not be aware of their rights and their responsibilities, and they would not question their elected representatives. So that could fuel the corruption and leakages within the Panchayati Raj institutions, and that could lead to the overall weakening of the PRIs. So therefore we must educate the elected representatives and public on the significance of rising their own revenues from the Panchayati Raj institutions. So after that, recently Ministry of Panchayati Raj, so this ministry has been constituted to overlook or to oversee the Panchayati Raj institutions. So this ministry has recommended to cover income from the rural business hubs, innovative commercial ventures, and renewable energy projects and carbon credits. So therefore, the Panchayati Raj institutions would become a self-sufficient or self-financing institutions. So that could further strengthen the Panchayati Raj institutions at the grassroots level and will help achieve the objectives which are mentioned under Article 40 of the Indian Constitution, right? So that's all about the Panchayati Raj institutions, and thank you.